You've spelunked into the Matt Cave. Hello, everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Matt Cave. Thank you all so much for spelunking on by. This week, it is the true first episode after college football season has really wrapped up for us in the state of Utah. I understand BYU has a bowl game coming up, but let's be real. The bowl games outside of the college football playoff don't matter anymore. They don't. No matter what the TV networks want to tell you, no matter what the bowl executives want to tell you, they don't matter. It's been happening for a long time now, and we've kind of reached a tipping point with the college football playoff. And that's where we are. Players are opting out for their own health, obviously, to get themselves ready for the NFL draft. And then there's massive amounts of transfers. Just as an idea, I know this is still the intro to the episode, but I'm getting off onto a tangent here early. As an example, not an idea, but an example, the bowl game that Army is going to be going to was originally slated to be facing off against Marshall, the champion of the Sun Belt. The bowl they go to is the champion of the American Athletic Conference versus the champion of the Sun Belt Conference. Well, due to the head coach of Marshall taking a different job, 24 players from Marshall hit the transfer portal. So that meant Marshall has no team. They can't field a team to go to that bowl game, so they had to withdraw. And now Army is facing off against Louisiana Tech, who has 6 wins but was not previously invited to a bowl game. That's kind of the world we're living in now. If a coach leaves, a lot of his players are going to leave with him because in the real world, those kids aren't going to go to school at your school. Those kids are going to play for the coaching staff that recruited them. And they're going to go because of the promises those coaches made, not because of what emblem is on the helmet. That's just the world we live in now. There are some kids who still go because they love the school, but for the high talent, the kids that want to go to the NFL, the kids that are going to win you games, yeah, those ones are going to be going away if the coach goes away. All right, so that was an early tangent. It's where we're at. Post-college football, I'm still not going to do the season in review. I want the attrition and all of the transfers and all that dust to settle after the 28th. So that will probably be either my first or second episode of the new year. That's just what to look forward to. A little teaser. But thank you all for being here. As always, please like, review, rate, subscribe, 5 stars, comment, whatever it is, however you listen. I would greatly appreciate everything you do for me. I always have, and I always will continue to be able to do this for all of you. And for myself. I am a little selfish. I love doing this. And so if I could do this more and get in front of a bigger audience, bully for me. You know, a little Teddy Roosevelt there. Bully. All right. So for this episode, I'll be talking about Utah Hockey Club and if they really truly have turned a corner and what I'm seeing. I'll talk about the Utah Jazz a little bit. There's not much to talk about with the Utah Jazz because, well, they stink, but they're supposed to stink. So I'll talk about what they're doing with the whole shuttling back and forth between the G League and why I don't think it's that bad of an idea. And then the Game Awards happened. And it is not without controversy. I'll get into that. That'll probably be the meat of the episode. So stick around for that. But let's dive into things with Utah Hockey Club. So let me start off by saying I'm not going to say I'm the reason why they've performed pretty well over the last 10 games. But ever since I did subscribe to Smith Entertainment Group Plus so that I could watch the games whenever I wanted and not have to be prisoner to the old cable company's way of blacking out local markets so that you can't watch on ESPN Plus, which is where the NHL Network hosts, or not the NHL Network, but where the NHL hosts the majority of their games, their bigger games. That's another episode altogether. I'm not going to get into it. But I did subscribe to it so I could watch the odd Utah Jazz game if I'm feeling bored and there's nothing on YouTube that catches my attention. But it's mainly for the Utah Hockey Club. And since I have subscribed, they are the first game that I watched on Smith Entertainment Group Plus was the Sabres game. Since that's 5 games. They're 4-1 with the only loss to the Minnesota Wild in a shootout. So they got a point, at least 1 point, in every game since I've been subscribed. I'm not going to say I'm the reason, but I'm also not going to say I'm not the reason. I'll leave that up to you guys. But The team looks good. They do. They don't look pensive like they did early in the season. They're aggressive. They're starting to trust that they know what to do when it comes to transition. And when the other team scores a goal, they don't just kind of start packing it in. There's fight. Clayton Keller, Dylan Gunther obviously leading the way with the goals, but the defense is so much better than it was early in the season. Ian Cole, Sergachev, even Valimaki, Kesselring. These guys are like diving in front of pucks like it's the Stanley Cup playoffs and we're in December. I'm loving what I'm seeing. The goalkeeping is hit or miss. Recently, it's very much hit, except for against the Wild and the Sharks. But against the Wild, it was more turnovers than goalie play because there were a couple of really bad turnovers that Utah made that allowed the Wild to come back in that game. And I'm not going to blame the goalie on that one. Against the Sharks, there were a couple of goals that Veg let in that even me, a layman when it comes to being a goalie and watching goalies in the National Hockey League, you should have made those saves. You should have had better positioning. Even I can see that. So the goalkeeping could be better, but this team is really starting to gel together. Knock on wood, I'm knocking on my skull here, that no major injuries occur to a Clayton Keller. Sergachev, oh man, heaven forbid anything happens to that man. Because without him, this team falls apart. I know he's not the captain, but my goodness. And we've gotten another first out of the way for the club because that was their first shootout and they lost it, whatever. But it was their first shootout and it's done. It's out of the way. There's no jitters for that. And it's just, okay, cool, it's a shootout, let's go. So what I'm seeing from the club is really good. I would like to see more physicality, though. In pretty much every game the club plays, they get out-hit. And so I think they just need Marino back, because Marino is a pretty good hitter. And then I think it'll get a little bit better, but teams aren't really afraid of the club when it comes to like hitting and all of that stuff. There are a couple of guys who will get into it. They'll mix it up a bit. Schmaltzy will get in there and ruffle some feathers. Kesselring is he wants to be a really good enforcer. He's just not bulked up enough to really be an enforcer. He's a big guy. He's like 6'8" on skates, but he's not beefed out a little bit to be able to be that enforcer guy. But he gets in there and he mixes it up. But I would like to see a little bit more, I guess, head coach Andre Trigny calls it toughness. So I'm just going to mimic what he said. But just more hitting and more protecting the goalie when it comes to those like scrambles at the net when the goalie's trying to cover it for a face-off and a stoppage in play. The other teams get away with a little bit more of poking at their goalie than they allow Utah to do. So I'd like to see a little bit of more scrappiness. That's the word I want. Scrappiness out of the club. But I think they're headed in the right direction. Honestly, I don't know if they really need to make a huge move because they're going to get two major pieces back around the trade deadline. And when they come back, John Marino being key among them, but then Sean Durzi will be back as well. That's those are two major additions where you don't have to give anything up for them. And who knows, right? Obviously the goal is to win a Stanley Cup, but I think for this club, for the club, I think the goal is the playoffs. And then when you hit the playoffs, you have nothing to lose. That's why teams like the Golden Knights in their first playoff run had nothing to lose. That's why they made the Stanley Cup. Teams like that go all the way. The Florida Panthers had nothing to lose. They won the Stanley Cup. When those teams get into the playoffs when nobody expected them to, the Blues, for example, a couple years ago with Jordan Binnington, they had nothing to lose. Those teams are dangerous in the playoffs, especially in 7-game series. And especially in a game like hockey. So that's the goal for the club. I'm still sticking to my pick that they make the playoffs. And then once the playoffs start, who knows? But what I saw against Colorado was really, really heartening because that team is stacked. And they only let one goal in. And that was when they pulled their goalie. That's when the Avalanche pulled their goalie, so they had an extra skater on the ice. And Utah only let one goal in. I mean, I'm very encouraged by what I'm seeing. What I saw against the Sharks was a little iffy. They let in some cheap ones, but other than that, I'm excited for where this club is headed. All right, let's move on to the Jazz. And the first day, I was subscribed to Smith Entertainment Group Plus. The Jazz were playing the Trailblazers. And they won 141-99 on the road. And I went, uh-oh. Maybe I made a oopsie. But then they returned to form. They lost to the Kings by like 50. And then they lost to the Suns by 8 at home. So that's the kind of loss you want with a young team, is that those close losses where it's competitive throughout. It's not a blowout. The other team doesn't pull their starters. They don't let off the gas. That's the kind of losses you want. Not the 141-97 against the Kings. Ooh, boy. But those are, and I'm going to keep preaching this. You're going to get sick of hearing it from me, but that's what we want as Jazz fans. We want the young guys to get run. We want them to get minutes. We want them to get the experience in the NBA, and we want them to be in important minutes when the other team is trying to win the game. You know, a team like the Suns is always going to be fighting hard because they might not make the playoffs this year. The West, outside of the Jazz and the Timberwolves, or not Timberwolves, excuse me, that's a flashback. Outside of the Jazz and the Trailblazers, there's not really any crappy teams. Every other team really has a realistic shot to make the play-in. So if the Jazz can keep close and keep these games really good, that's what will help develop these young guys. Now, I've seen some stuff online about Cody Williams and Kyle Filipowski, Bryce Sensabaugh, Isaiah Collier, all these rookies or year two guys being shuttled between the Jazz and the G League. The Jazz don't treat the G League or the Salt City Stars as a demotion or, you know, you're banished to the shadow realm. The Jazz use it for these guys to get game time. And so for this first part of the season, before the Jazz make any sort of moves with their veterans, those minutes are going to the veterans. And so if the rookies can't prove themselves to be, I don't know about better, but more engaged, they need the minutes more than the veterans, based off of more than just that they're the young guys and they just need the minutes. They want these guys to play ball. And that's why the Jazz are so unique with their G League, is they utilize it as a tool and not just like a stash. You know, we're going to grab some young guys, we're going to stash them, and then if we have injuries, we'll throw them in. That's not how the Jazz run things. That's not how Danny Ainge, Justin Zanuck, Will Hardy, Ryan Smith, that's not how they look at it. It's about getting these guys more time, about getting them confidence that they can play at the highest level, because the G League is pretty much the second best league of basketball in the world. And when those guys pop off, like Cody Williams had a double-double the other night, Kyle Filipowski averages like 20 points when he's in the G League, that is good because that gets them confidence that maybe I can hang. I can play against the best of the best. So that's important. So it's getting the young guys confidence. It's getting them practice time in game situations against guys that are fighting for their careers. So this is really good stuff that I'm seeing out of the Jazz. It's not what fans want to see. Fans want to see wins. They want to see flashy dunks, big plays. But if you look at it from a more analytical and team-building side, that's the way Jazz fans need to look. This is exactly pretty much what we wanted to have happen. If Will Hardy wasn't such a darn good coach, this is what would have happened 2 years ago. But he's such a good coach that he got the veterans into places where they're going to succeed, and the Jazz were fighting for a playoff spot at the trade deadline. And then Justin Zanuck and Danny Ainge had to go, all right, we're pulling the plug on the season. Who are your most important pieces? They're gone. It's going to happen again this season, but the Jazz only have 5 wins. So that's where we're at. And I'm liking what I'm seeing because the young guys, I mean, they're making mistakes, but they're learning from them. Keontae George is just getting better. Obviously, we got Lauri Markkanen for a long time with that deal he signed. That's awesome. Now we just need to lose so that we could get Harper or Cooper Flagg in the draft. That's the goal. All right, so that's pretty much for the sports talk. That's all I've got. How did I miss this one? Heisman Trophy. They got it right. They almost got it wrong. It was the smallest margin of victory for the Heisman since like 2007. It was like 200 and something votes. And there's a few things I want to call out on this. First, Who was voting for Cam Skattebo for Heisman? He got 4 first-place votes. Are you kidding me? No. No. Dylan Gabriel got some first-place votes. No. He's on a stacked team. All he needed to do was not turn the ball over. That was his job. It was a 2-horse race between Travis Hunter and Ashton Jeanty of Boise State. Travis Hunter of Colorado. Everybody else was just kind of there to be there. Cam Ward, well, you kind of messed up towards the end of the season. You lost out. Whoever voted for Cam Skattebo should not be allowed to vote. Like, who? I want to know who voted for him. My goodness. So it was the closest margin, and they almost screwed it up. They really did. Ashton Jeanty had a wonderful year. In any other year, really, he probably should have won the Heisman. But we have never seen a player like Travis Hunter, who is a shutdown corner, and he's also a number 1 receiver. We've never seen it. And we'll probably never see it again. He deserved the Heisman. That's what I've been saying all year. If he doesn't get hurt, if he doesn't miss a significant amount of time, and he still plays at that level, yeah, he's the Heisman. Easy. And they almost screwed it up. I don't get it. It's got to be like these old heads that are like, no, you can't change the way the game is played. You can't. I'm sorry. Yes, you can. And Travis Hunter proved it. At the highest level, too. He did it at a Power 4 conference. And he did it against everybody. Even in the games that Colorado lost this year, he was still the star player. So yes, Travis Hunter 100% deserves to take home the Heisman Trophy. Not even close. But these old heads figured, Ashton Jeanty, who didn't play against anyone. He played against Oregon. I remember back in the day when these small school guys were up for Heisman, that was the reason they didn't win. They put up these, mind-boggling numbers, but the knock on them was who'd they play. Boise State played Oregon, and Ashton Jeanty was barely... He played well, but he didn't play Heisman well. And then every other game, obviously, he's going to run over the competition. It's the Mountain West. There are no good teams in the Mountain West. Boise is the good team in the Mountain West. It's like if BYU and Utah were still in the Mountain West, and Utah had, Cam Rising one of those years. Cam Rising would have had almost Ty Detmer numbers. And same thing with Taysom Hill. If Taysom Hill was around, he would have had Tim Tebow numbers. But they would not have won the Heisman because they were in the Mountain West. Who'd they play? It's the same thing with Ashton Jeanty, but they tried to give it away to him. Oh, man, you could tell my feathers are ruffled here. But they got it right, barely. Travis Hunter is the Heisman. He played both ways, number 1 corner and number 1 wide receiver. You didn't throw his way. If you did, it was either a pass breakup or an interception. That's Darrelle Revis type. Champ Bailey. Deion Sanders in his prime. So, yeah. I just thought I needed to chime in on that one. It wasn't even close. It was Travis Hunter's award. All right, speaking of awards. Oh, did you like that one? We've got the Game Awards, annually done. Voted by gamers, game journalists, as well as their peers, the people that make the games. The caveat for those that make the games, they cannot vote for themselves. They have to vote for somebody else. There's controversy here. But let me talk about the awards that I care about most, and if they got these right. First is Best Independent Game, also known as Best Indie Game. This means it is a game that is either published by the creator themselves or by a small publishing studio, not your EA, Ubisoft, Activision, Blizzard, any of those guys, Microsoft, Sony, none of them. Or even FromSoft now. FromSoft is now a AAA. Funny. I remember when they were indie and considered indie and off the wall when they did Demon's Souls. Anyway, so let's start with Indie Game. The nominees were Animal Well, Balatro, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, Neva, and UFO 50. I've only played one of them, and I watched 2 others. I watched Neva and I watched Animal Well. And Balatro, by far and away, if you haven't played it, it is a poker meets... the term of the game is called roguelike or roguelite, but it's a randomized sequence that you go into where you need to get a high score with your cards, but you can change out your deck. You can make modifications to it. You get certain improvements or buffs, is the parlance in gaming, that make your deck better, get your combos stronger so you can hit a point threshold to get to the next boss or next level. It's a fantastic game. It was published and developed by one guy, Local Punk, I think his name is, and wonderfully done. Well-deserved best indie game by far and away. Next one I care about a lot, and this is very important in all video games. It's best score and music. And I'll just read off what it is. It's for outstanding music, inclusive of score, original song, and or licensed soundtrack. The nominees were Astrobot, we'll get into that game in a second, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Metaphor ReFantazio, Silent Hill 2, and Stellar Blade. Of those games, only one do I recommend for children, and that would be Astrobot. Every other game, not for children. The winner was Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, to the surprise of nobody. When it comes to soundtracks and it comes to big IPs that Sony develops, they have their own in-house orchestra. They do. And so it's a little bit unfair to all these other games because Square could just use that in-house orchestra that Sony has to develop that music. And the music in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, outstanding. This is very well deserved. I don't think this one was a controversy or even that close. The game that I think had a soundtrack that could be close to it would be Metaphor ReFantazio, but it's a little bit different when it comes to the music they use. There's a lot of like Gregorian chanting in it that kind of throws you off when you first get into the game. You get used to it as you get into your 70th hour, which is where I'm at. But I think, again, well-deserved. So they got that one right. Best narrative for outstanding storytelling and narrative development in a game. How do you tell the story of your game? The nominees were Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, where for this one, I'll give a quick synopsis of the game, I guess. You play as a former Yakuza gang member who is trying to get out as well as get revenge. It's a different take on the Grand Theft Auto style game, and it's played like an RPG. It was probably a terrible explanation, but that's how I see that game. So, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Metaphor ReFantazio, love that game. Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 and Silent Hill 2. I'm glad Silent Hill 2 did not win because that's just a retelling of the story they released back in the 90s. Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 is a sequel to a fantastic game. Bet you can't guess what that name is, Senua's Saga Hellblade. Oh, that's a wonderful game that is about mental health and expectations and not living up to them as you see them. It's a wonderful game, and this is a follow-up to it, which is also a wonderful game. Like the only hit Microsoft Game Studios has had in like six years. But Metaphor ReFantazio took this one. Could not agree more. It is a wonderful story of a young man who is trying to win the throne from a militaristic, power solves everything, if you can't fight and survive, I'm not going to protect you sort of guy. And it's fantastic. I recommend this game to anyone and everyone over the age of 16. I love Metaphor ReFantazio. So, that game won Best Narrative. Best RPG. Kind of self-explanatory, but for the best game designed with rich player character customization and progression, including massively multiplayer experiences. So MMORPGs are included as well. The nominees were Dragon's Dogma 2, Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree, which DLC should not be included in any of these. It should have its own category. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, and Metaphor ReFantazio. And they got this one right. Metaphor ReFantazio won. It's not a sequel. It's not a follow-up game like the other ones were. It's not a DLC. It was an original idea of a story with a very unique way to do character progression. Yes, your character still levels up, but You can unlock these things throughout the game known as archetypes, which is how you cast your magic. It's how you do all these cool abilities, and it's wonderful. Again, I cannot recommend this game enough. Best multiplayer. Kind of self-explanatory, but for outstanding online multiplayer gameplay and design, including co-op and massively multiplayer experiences, irrespective of game genre or platform. So it's all-inclusive. It doesn't have to be universal. It could be just for one console and all this other stuff. So the nominees were Call of Duty Black Ops 6, Helldivers 2, Super Mario Party Jamboree, Tekken 8, and Warhammer 40k Space Marine. Of these games, for the family, Super Mario Party Jamboree, easy. They took the best parts and pieces of all of the Super Mario Party games that have been out for like 20 some odd years and mashed them into this one game, and it's a great experience. Tekken 8, kind of taking over the fighting game genre. It used to be Street Fighter for forever, used to be Soul Calibur back in the day. Tekken is coming back into it as the leader of the pack. Call of Duty Black Ops 6, I swear they only put it up there to appease those. Well, pretty much Call of Duty players now, in my opinion, are meatheads. But that's pretty much what I think they put it up there for. And Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine 2, I talked about it a few weeks ago, or a couple months ago now. But it's like a Gears of War RPG, very gory, very messy, but very fun game that is in the Warhammer universe. So it's that one. But Helldivers 2 won it. I talked about this one in length a couple of months ago about the kerfuffle between Sony and Steam and locking out regions and not refunding those players. It's a mess. But for everybody who can still play it, for everybody who put time into it, it's a very fun game. It's you're spreading the cause of managed democracy is what they call it. It's very funny. And you fight different kinds of aliens, robots, bugs, zombies coming up now. Alien zombies, I guess. But that one won multiplayer game of the year. For the nominees, I think, yeah, that's the winner. Obviously, like Final Fantasy, World of Warcraft, they don't really get nominated anymore. But those are more for the ongoing game category that they have. So, Helldivers 2 out of these, yeah. I mean, yeah. And then finally, the controversy. I'll spend the last 2.5 minutes talking about this. So, Game of the Year, self-explanatory. Recognizing a game that delivers the absolute best experience across all creative and technical fields. Nominees are Metaphor ReFantazio. I've already said my piece about it. I think it should have won Game of the Year, personally. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It's tough to give a sequel Game of the Year. Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. A DLC should not be winning Game of the Year. Black Myth Wukong, a very close second for me. Black Myth Wukong is a wonderful game developed by a Chinese studio. Massive hit, massive success. And it blends a lot of the more difficult games, like Dark Souls, Nioh, games like those, into a wonderful story about the myth of Wukong. Balatro, already talked about that one. Love seeing an indie game up here for Game of the Year. And then Astrobot. Astrobot was the winner. All right, I disagree wholeheartedly. I thought it was a sham. I thought it was Jeff Keighley and the Game Awards bowing to Sony due to a put your tinfoil hats on, everybody. Backroom deal saying we're not going to be supporting this award ceremony if you do not put a Sony game up and make it win Game of the Year. Whether it be Helldivers 2, whether it be Astrobot, or something else entirely. That's my tinfoil hat theory. Astrobot is a wonderful family game. It's a platformer. They took a lot of inspiration from Mega Man and Mario, Yoshi's Island. They took a lot of inspiration from that and made their own game. It's very family friendly. It is a very cute and good game. I'm not going to say it's a bad game because it's not. But it's a game that's tossed in with the console. And a toss-in game like that, I don't know. I don't think it should be up for Game of the Year. I really don't. I don't see how it fits with a Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, with a Black Myth Wukong, or even a Metaphor ReFantazio. I don't see it. And I disagree wholeheartedly. And I'm allowed to. So they got it wrong. I thought Metaphor should have won. The overall majority of people thought Black Myth Wukong should have won. And everybody agrees that Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree shouldn't be up for this category. They should have its own standalone category called Best DLC of the Year. So we'll see if they make that change or not coming up. But that's the show, everybody. Let me know if you agree or not. I hope you don't. I hope we can have some discourse here because Astrobot shouldn't have won. But Travis Hunter should have won, and he did. So that's the show. Thank you all so much for being here. I don't know if I'll be recording another episode throughout the rest of this year. We'll have to see what happens, how much news is going on. But if I don't talk to you again, I hope you have a very wonderful Christmas, a very safe and happy New Year, and I will see you when we spelunk back into the Mad Cave.